Oh, good. And I am recording this now. If you've seen the video, do you have any questions from it? Because what I was hoping is if we watch the video, then we could start talking about how you use it to change children's behavior, or how you can use it if you're working with a family and you want to change the husband's behavior or the wife's behavior, you want to make the couple stronger. So I thought since we've already got, if you've watched the video and have the basics, that we could move on from that. And I'm Roseanne. I don't think I've met you, Emmanuel. Oh, I hope you can hear us. So, do we know who else might be joining us tonight?
Well, we expect all other participants to join in, but we just hope they will.
We'll give it a few minutes. I have the PowerPoint set up and ready to go, so if we need to, I can share the screen to make sure that people understand things. But are there any questions to begin with? Like from what you watched? Okay. The reason I think it's important to do the learning is because when we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, or when we talk about behavior therapy, or we talk about changing it, we need to realize that people don't change their behavior if what they get from their behavior is much more reinforcing than what we try to do. So sometimes you see it here a lot, I don't know how much you see it there, where children have temper tantrums. And the reason they have temper tantrums, even though mom gets mad at them and mom yells at them, is because eventually mom gives in and gives them whatever treat they're having a temper tantrum for. So the getting yelled at, they're not going to stop doing it if they still get the treat that they really want. Somebody who has a problem with alcohol, even if they get in trouble at work, even if they feel sick in the morning, they're not going to quit drinking alcohol if the way they enjoy the alcohol is better for them than the problems it causes. So one of the reasons I think it's really important that we look at the learning is one of the things we sometimes have to find out is, what do we have that the child or the partner cares about more than the bad behavior that they're doing and what the bad behavior gets them? Because a lot of times people continue in marriages, or children continue with that bad behavior because they've learned it gets them what they want. So a lot of times people think learning doesn't have a lot to do with therapy, but it does, because if you don't know why they're doing it and what they're doing it for, it's hard to start shifting the behavior. Now, oops, Bonnie is here.
Okay.
Here's Bonnie. It says she's, there she is. I have no, oh, Bonnie is currently in Zambia, according to this picture. And I want to apologize for how late I was in getting the video up this week. My stepfather has come back into our life because he's very ill. So things have been kind of difficult because I've been having to go over and take care of him in his house. So I just got really slowed down this past week. But hopefully Bonnie and I will have a chance to meet, and we will see about who's going to be doing it next week, whether I'm going to post the lifespan this week, or Bonnie's going to post about stress. Bonnie, can you hear us? Because we can't see you. Your camera's not live. I'm going to message Bonnie and see if she can hear me. I know I have a... Okay. So if we've watched the video, what I was hoping is if you had questions, or if you've read the chapter and you've got questions, or if you've got things that you would like to talk about, because I want to make sure that if there's anything you had difficulty understanding or anything that wasn't explained very well, that we have a chance to talk about all that and make sure everybody understands us. And I have no idea if Bonnie can hear me or see me. Okay.
But are you seeing her yourself?
All I can see of her is a still photograph, and it says her camera isn't on and her microphone isn't on.
Okay.
So I don't think she can hear us. So.
Wow.
Okay.
On the video,
yeah,
I observed that the volume was very low. Maybe next time, if you can try to speak up, Rosanna.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to speak slowly because I know I talk really fast. And I think the problem is when I speak slowly, my voice gets quieter. I will remember that. And I will also make sure my microphone is up as loud as it goes.
Please.
Okay.
I'm here, Roseanne. I'm just on speaker, not video.
Okay.
I'm driving.
Oh my goodness.
But I'm here.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you're driving, we'll be careful. All right. So I guess maybe I should go through some of the things in the PowerPoint if I was too quiet. So let me get my PowerPoint screen up.
I think so.
Okay. And I'm going to put it into the slideshow. Okay. As I said, one of the reasons we need to look at learning, is because we have some instinctive behaviors, but learning is a permanent change in our behavior because of experience. And as I said, when we look at it in therapy, we learn if we grow up in a family where we can't trust our parents, where our parents yell and shout and lie to us, or our father leaves and is never around, that makes us grow up and we have learned not to trust adults. So learning is very important in looking at behavior and in looking at relationships, because it's what we learn that is what's going to cause problems. Because one of the things when we look at brand new babies, it's clear we are designed to try and form relationships. Babies smile when you smile at them. If you give a sad face to a baby and you stare at it like this, the baby will start to fuss and cry trying to make you smile. So that's why the learning is so important. And what we're doing is we're making connections and realizing what always happens and what doesn't happen. And so with babies, you see them because they don't know anything. So babies will drop a ball. Mom will pick it up, they'll drop the ball. What they are learning is how the world works, that if I drop that ball, it always falls. It won't start to float. They're also learning things. So like, if I cry, every time I cry, my mother comes. And that teaches babies, I can count on people, I can trust people, I can rely on them. If I cry, and sometimes mom comes, and sometimes she doesn't, and sometimes she loves me, and sometimes she hits me, those children grow up and they don't have a lot of empathy. They didn't get empathy, so they don't know how to give empathy. So the learning is really important. Oh, Bonnie went away. And there's been a bunch of types of learning that they researched. The first one is classical conditioning, which is usually used with teaching animals or teaching kids some really basic, simple behaviors. Operant conditioning, where we teach other ones, and observational listening. Operant conditioning is, believe it or not, the one that becomes really important in marital therapy. Because with classical conditioning, basically you're just teaching somebody to react to a stimulus. So when your alarm clock goes off, you wake up. When the fire alarm goes off, you run out of the building. When there's a loud noise, you get startled. You can teach people to have those same reactions to things that are not the natural response. So I can make a dog salivate, I can make a dog salivate to the sound of a bell. I can make a child be afraid of a rabbit if every time they go to touch the rabbit, we smack our hands near his ears or we yell at him. And actually, Watson did that to a baby, and it was really horrible. The baby started to be terrified of rabbits. But Watson said, look it, we can explain why people end up afraid of things by their experiences. So the most famous one was Pavlov. One of the things with classical conditioning is it doesn't last. Eventually, because you keep ringing the bell and you don't give the dog food, it stops doing it. So, but if you inconsistently pair those things, the dog keeps doing it. So you can teach dogs to avoid a certain spot. You can teach children, like if every time you smack their hand when they go to touch the hot stove, after a while, they don't need you to smack their hand to remember not to touch the hot stove. You only need to do it once in a while to remind them. So it will stay there. Once you've trained it enough times and you keep them doing it, some of those automatic behaviors, toilet training's a really good example of it. At first, it's mom being trained. Mom sees the face on the baby and goes, oh, the baby's about to go, and puts them on the potty. Well, eventually the baby learns go on the potty. And as we get older, it's more reinforcing to go on the potty because a wet diaper feels awful. And that's actually one of the problems with toilet training babies now, because a wet diaper is unpleasant. A diaper that is poopy doesn't feel good on your bum. But those new disposable diapers they have, they suck it up so well that the baby doesn't feel it, so he doesn't want to bother using the toilet. So that's actually one of the problems, because we're trying to train them. And every time you sit on this toilet or in the potty, you go. But since they're not uncomfortable, it's harder for them to learn it. So that classical conditioning, once we've got them learning it, they'll keep doing it. But it is something we need to practice. Now, the other thing is, babies, when we're teaching things to classical conditioning, over time you generalize. The baby may at first only go in his little potty in your house. But after a while, he realizes, I can go in every single potty. I can use a toilet in anybody's house. I can use the one at the school. So they generalize it. So that's them learning how to do it. So it's important with teaching babies, but it's not necessarily something that's important in marriage, but it can be. If you are in a marriage and your husband hits you every time he's drinking, you will start to be scared every time you smell alcohol, even if it's not your husband. So you will see women get very frightened if their husband drinks and hits them. If your husband comes home from work every day and he hates his job, so he comes home and yells, at 5 o'clock at night, you'll see the woman being like scared every night. And if he comes home every night at 5 o'clock and he greets her with a hug and a kiss, you will see her around 5 o'clock, even if he's not there yet, starting to look happy and look out the window to see him, because she's been conditioned that if he's angry when he comes home from work every day, she'll be scared. If he's happy when he comes home from work every day, she'll be happy and excited to see him. So it does play a little bit, because if you say to somebody, when you get home, be happy, and your wife will be happy and your marriage will be better. When you come home, even if you've had a bad day, try to make the first thing your wife sees be your smile. And that's a way of helping the positive feeling to be turned on as soon as they come in. Okay. Why is this not? Oh, there we go. So there's the story I said about little Albert, where he made him afraid of the rabbits. So what I wanted to do is I went over the classical conditioning a little bit shorter this time, but I wanted to see if you had any questions about some of that, how that works. Another way you might see it in real life is every time the wife wants to go out and spend money, she makes her husband a special meal. So after a while, when he gets the special meal, instead of feeling happy, he'll go, oh, what you gonna ask me for this time? Because in his head, the special meal doesn't mean she's being loving. It means, oh, she wants me to buy her something. So we can make those kinds of connections without thinking about it. If you know, you wear a special outfit every time you and your husband celebrate, as soon as he sees that special outfit, he might start to feel excited. So trying to do some of those things is a way of helping people to see how their behaviors can trigger a reaction in another person, even if they weren't planning it, but it's because it's been paired so many times that that's now the reaction. And sometimes we need to look at, what am I doing that triggers that reaction in my wife or my husband? Operant condition, though, it's a lot more deliberate. We don't do it accidentally. We do it on purpose. And what you're trying to do is either increase the frequency of a behavior or decrease the frequency of a behavior, or you're trying to change a behavior to make it more specific and close to what you want it to be like. So if you are teaching your child to do the laundry, the first time they may just sort the clothing, and you go, that's great, you did such a good job helping me. This time, can you put the clothing in the bucket and start to soak it? Great, now you know how to sort it, now you know how to soak it. I'm so proud of you. And the praise is the reinforcer. And what you're doing is you're making them understand how to do it bit by bit. And so one of the things that's important to understand, because people will use these terms a lot when they're writing in books about how to change behavior. And a lot of people, one of the things they do is, oh, punishment is bad. No, punishment isn't bad. Punishment is to decrease the frequency of a bad behavior. Now, if your punishment is I punch the person in the face, that's bad. If your punishment is I hurt them, that's bad. But what a punishment is doing is trying to teach somebody that this behavior is bad. So a positive punishment doesn't mean it's a good punishment. A positive punishment means I'm doing something to make the person stop doing it. So like I said, if your husband comes home and he's yelling and screaming, and the wife goes, that's it, I'm not talking to him and I'm not giving him supper. Well, sorry, that's not talking. And the wife locks him out of the room. That's a positive punishment. She is making him stay outside. She is giving him a cold supper. So she's punishing his yelling and screaming when he comes home to make it decrease. Another positive punishment, we do it a lot with teenagers. You didn't clean up the kitchen, so now you have to clean up the whole kitchen and the house. A positive punishment to a child may be you hit your brother, so now you have to do your brother's chores. So you're making the child do something to make up for it. And one of the ones that's best is if they have to fix and make up for it. So if a child breaks a toy, breaks something in the living room, you make him sweep it up. You make it clean it. So he's having to do something to fix what he did wrong. A negative punishment is you take something away. And I don't know, in Canada, a very common punishment for teenagers is what we call grounding them. So you misbehaved. You talked back to your father. You didn't do your homework. You are not allowed to go out at all this week. You have to be home every night right after school and help out. You can't go see your friends. You can't hang out in the front yard. You can't have people over to visit. Now, the problem with that punishment is it means you as a parent have to put up with your angry teenager, but it teaches the teenager, if I don't do this, my parents will take away my privileges to go outside. Another one might be that if a child takes a toy, you take his toy. A very common one is putting a child in the corner where he can't see anybody, so he's taken away from all the fun in the room. And all of those are supposed to teach the person what you did was wrong. A very common one you often hear about, because when I'm doing marriage therapy, the one I often hear about is whenever I do something wrong, my wife will not go to bed with me. She says no touching her until I fix it. And that makes a lot of men very angry, and so it's not necessarily good for the marriage. But it is one I hear a lot about when husband and wives are having a problem. And the reason it works is because we are able to make those connections. If I turn the light switch on, I realize every time I flick it, the light comes on. When I realize every time I come home late, if I come home and I've been drinking, my parents won't allow me out of the house. If I want to go out of the house, I will stop coming home late. I will stop coming home drinking. It's called the law of effect. And it's how it works both for realizing if I do this bad thing happens, but it also works for if I do this good thing happens. So here are some of the examples. So if the child is talking, the teacher makes them write, I will listen in class 100 times. Now, one of the things, there are some positive punishments that make things worse. If you come home late from work and your wife yells and screams at you, you're going to keep coming home from work in order to provide her, in order to avoid her yelling and screaming at you. If the wife burns the dinner and the husband calls her names, the wife is going to stop cooking dinner for him. She's going to avoid it. If a teenager leaves a mess and the parents hit her in the face, she's going to want to run away from home and she doesn't want to listen to her parents. So we do have to realize that punishment that hurts people doesn't work very often because it makes them avoid the person or not like the person or not trust the person. So one of the things is we need to remember that when we're trying to eliminate a bad behavior, we're all usually trying to make something better in place of it. So what we have to do is start to reinforce those good behaviors we want. And one of the things I often see in a marriage is they start keeping track. Well, I gave my wife a coffee and she didn't do anything for me, so I'm not doing anything nice until she does something nice for me. Or when they're first dating, the wife tells the husband how handsome he is, or she tells him how happy she is to see him, or she makes an effort to look nice when he comes. The man, when he's dating, compliments her. He takes her out to dinner. He may bring her flowers. He may say, oh, I found this beautiful fruit at the store and I brought it because I know you like fruit. So they're constantly doing nice things for each other. When you get married, sometimes that keeps going. Did you have a question, Emmanuel? Emmanuel, do you have a question? Okay. What we forget is when we are married, sometimes we get in the habit of not doing that. But a lot of the times, those positive reinforcers, they don't need to be buying stuff. My husband makes me a coffee every morning. It started because when we were first married, he worked at a restaurant. So we would go there and I would go to my office to work and he would go to the restaurant, but he always made me a coffee as soon as he got into the restaurant and I took it to work. So he now makes me a coffee every morning. But to show him I appreciate it, to show him I love him, I always make sure I say thank you. For my husband, I make sure to cook foods he likes. I make sure that I give him hugs and say thank you a lot. And what you see in marriages is people stop remembering to do those positive behaviors. So a lot of times when I start marriage counseling, they want to talk about how they disagree about money. And they want to talk about those things. And I'm going, you don't even like each other very much right now. We have to make you like each other before you start talking about these big problems. So a really good way to make each other like one another again is to continue to do all those positive reinforcements and to think of ways, how can I be kind to my partner? And we don't always think about that as a positive reinforcement. But if I'm nice to them after they're nice to me, they'll want to be nice to me again. And because they've been nice to me, I'll want to be nice to them. And it keeps going back and forth. We can also do it really deliberately with children. So the child does their homework and you say, oh, you did such a good job finishing your homework. Let's go play ball together. And now the child's really happy and excited and goes, well, I'm going to keep doing this. Every time I do my homework, my dad plays ball with me when I get home. With teenagers, when they do what we want them to do, we'll give them a treat. Now, one of the things is sometimes what we give them is what we call a secondary reinforcer. So with my son had real difficulty with school. So we would sit down and do homework. And to begin with, for every math problem he finished, I would give him a penny. Now, it wasn't for him to spend the penny, but it meant at the end of the week, if he had enough pennies, he could decide what we were having for dinner. If he had enough pennies, he could pick what movie we would go and watch. If he had enough pennies, I would go out and buy him a book that I would read to him. So it wasn't that the pennies were for money, it was to let him do something. As he got better at finishing math, he had to do 3 or 4 math problems before I would give him a penny. So one of the things we can look at is how we use natural life to do it. Negative reinforcement is much, much less common, because negative reinforcement is when we increase the behavior by having something bad happen if you don't do it. So if you don't put your seatbelt on, your car goes beep, 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 beep until you put it in. If you don't clean your room, your mother goes nag, 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 and yells at you and makes life miserable until you clean your room. Negative reinforcement is harder and it tends to be really irritating. But we really want, this is what we're doing when we're trying to change behavior. And one of the things we often talk about is if you can make the consequence for bad behavior be like natural consequences. So one of the things that I get with parents when they're arguing, when they're working with their teenagers and their teenagers don't shower enough or don't keep their room clean enough, or they won't, with little kids, here in Canada, this one's big, they don't want to put their winter coat on. Sometimes you just say, fine, don't. And then when they don't clean their room and their friends come over and don't want to be there because their room is dirty, or they don't have any clean clothes left for school because they didn't clean their room, you kind of go, well, that's your problem. We told you that would happen. Obviously, you wouldn't do that to a 5-year-old because 5-year-olds have to be taught how to clean their room, but a 15-year-old knows how to do it. A 5-year-old who goes out without their coat on will very quickly come inside the house in the middle of winter and go, may I have my coat? So sometimes we can change the behavior by letting them experience the consequences. The other thing is sometimes we can ignore behavior. Temper tantrums are very hard for parents to ignore. But if you ignore it and don't give in, sooner or later the child learns having a temper tantrum doesn't work. If the student keeps yelling out in class and the teacher keeps answering them and talking to them, sometimes kids, oh, is Emmanuel trying to ask a question? Oh, no, I think sometimes if a child would rather have any attention than no attention, so even if he's talking out in class and the teacher's annoyed, he'd rather get the teacher going than be ignored. So we need to learn things like if the student's talking out in class, ignore him. So some of what we're trying to do is recognize people will learn. If this is the effect of my behavior and I don't like it, I will stop doing it. But that's one of the problems for bad behaviors too. It's also with criminals. If I steal from a store and I like everything I've stolen, I will keep stealing. And one of the problems is a lot of times when you steal from a store, I don't know how it works in Zambia, but let's say you steal from a store. You may eat all that food you stole or spend all that money, and it's not till 3 or 4 weeks later that they catch you and you're in trouble. So it feels like they're not connected. So one of the things my mother used to say, when your father gets home, he will talk to you. So this was at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. When your father is home tonight, he will talk to you. So my dad would get home at 6 o'clock at night. And by that time, my sister and I have forgotten what we did. We're over the fight we had. I have apologized for hitting her, or she's apologized for pulling my hair, or the one time she had to apologize for taking the scissors and cutting my hair off. But by that time, it's over. And my dad tries to punish us or reinforce us or whatever, and it's so far ago, we go, don't care. So one of the things with if you're going to consequence behavior, it has to happen right away. One of the reasons criminals keep being criminals and keep stealing is by the time they get in trouble for it or by the time they get sent to jail for it, it's so far gone. They end up blaming, well, it was the trial. I'm in trouble because it took so long to get to the trial. I'm in trouble because my lawyer wasn't very good. I'm in trouble because the judge wasn't fair. They don't go, I'm in trouble because I robbed the store. So we need to make sure if we're punishing something, we need to do it right then and there. So when the child is late for supper, if that night he gets cold food, you don't talk to him and say, you need to go, you give him cold food. By the time I've had cold supper 3 nights in a row, I will be realizing I need to come home right from school. One of the things, and I hear this from parents, why should I have to bribe my children to behave? Well, when you bribe somebody, you're trying to make them do something they shouldn't. I don't know about you, and you tend to go, if you do this, I'll give it to you. And way too many people, when they're bribing their kids, give it to them before the kid has done it. No, they have to be finished and done, because then it's not bribery. Because it's natural to get reinforced for doing stuff. Because I don't know about you guys, I would not go to work if I didn't get paid. Getting paid is my reinforcement. The other thing is lots of people say, well, if I reinforce them, they'll never do it on their own. But most of the behaviors we're trying to teach people are behaviors we want them to do because it will be good for them. So when husbands say, why should I compliment my wife? She's supposed to cook dinner. Well, yes, but if you compliment your wife and you sit down, after a while cooking dinner and sitting with you, she doesn't need the compliment. She's just happy to see you happy eating. If we praise children and give them a token for doing their math, eventually my son wanted to be able to do math so that he could get good marks in school. Children like to get good marks. So reinforcing them for doing their homework, we don't have to keep doing it because eventually they go, oh, my teacher praised me. Oh, I got a good mark. Oh, I'm getting a good job. Oh, I got into a good school. So the things that we're trying to teach them, by the time they learn them, will keep them happy. So if you are nice to your wife or your husband and they are nice back, after a while, you don't have to think about it and you're not going, okay, I need to praise her 3 times today. You just do it because you want to make her happy and she wants to make you happy. So it becomes natural. It becomes natural to do my homework. For a teenager, even if you fight with them a lot about keeping their room clean, keeping my room clean starts to feel nice. I like it more. I don't know, what are some of the other problems that you have with teenagers there? Oh, here, smoking cigarettes is another one. We don't want them to smoke cigarettes. So at first, even though we're having to do lots of stuff, in the long run, they'll stop smoking cigarettes because they have more money and more things they can do with the money. One of the things we have to look at is we often reinforce bad behavior. So if a child's fussing, giving them the treat keeps them doing it. A lot of times when somebody has an alcohol problem and the next morning they're feeling sick and bad, their husband or wife tries to make them feel better. They bring them tea, they give them food, they put a cloth on their head to make the headache go away. And they go, why should I quit drinking? Look at all the nice attention I get afterwards. When somebody is upset and angry and are yelling at us and we apologize and say we won't do it again, and we will fix it. What they are learning is if I behave badly, I can scare people into doing what I want. So sometimes what's really hard is sort of standing up and going, you did a bad thing and you are sick now and you're throwing up because you drank too much and I'm not going to help you with it. Now, if your husband or wife is sick because they have the flu, of course you help them with that. So one of the things we need to remember is we can teach bad behavior and reinforce bad behavior. And sometimes when you see that in marriages, what you see is every time the husband is angry, the wife gives in, or every time the wife starts to yell, the husband gives in. So what starts to happen is the husband or wife always gets it their way. And then the marriage goes bad because the other person feels like, I'm unloved. I never get what I want. They don't care what I think. But that's because every time the other person's angry, they do whatever they can to calm them down. Any questions so far? Okay. Whoops, I keep trying to change it with my finger and I need to hit the button. When we're reinforcing, there's things that we call primary reinforcements. And those are the things that fill a natural urge. So food, candy, nice clothing, something, touch. Those are the things, though, the things that we forget is touch. Hugging a person makes them feel good. So touching and hugging somebody is a primary reinforcer. Social time, we like to be involved with people. So social time is a reinforcer. But we can't always give those things. If you're if you're with your wife and you're wanting to do something, sometimes you can't just hand them a treat of food. With a dog, you can always hand them a treat of food. But secondary are things like money. Giving somebody money will get them to do that behavior again and again and again. And you probably all know that from working. Money isn't reinforcing. It's that money can buy you what you need is reinforcing. Because if all of a sudden there was no food, you wouldn't care how much money they gave you. Because I can't eat money. If there was no warm clothing and it was storming out, you wouldn't care how much money they gave you because it won't keep you warm. So that's why it's not primary. Praise also works because it reminds people you love me, you care about me, you want me to do well. And when we're with little kids, giving them tokens, giving them stickers on their work. Every time you go to bed, you get a sticker. Kids will do that because stickers are cute, but also because they can trade them in. So it's important to try and look at what you've got around that you can use to increase the behavior. So when I'm doing marriage counseling, I'll sometimes say, what is something your husband used to do that you really liked? Okay, husband, I want you to do that. Wife, every time he does it, you do something nice for him. And then I'll ask the husband, what is something your wife used to do that made you feel very loved? Okay, wife, you do that now. And husband, every time she does it, you thank her. One of the things we look at, though, is over time, sometimes it's hard to reinforce people every time. So one of the things we look at is sometimes you get reinforcement after a certain amount of time of doing something. So if you want a child to do homework, every 15 minutes, they're allowed to take a break and play ball with you. That's a fixed schedule. It means you work for 30 minutes, you will get this. You work for 20 minutes, I'll give you a token, and once you've got 5 tokens, we'll go for a walk. The variable length is if you work for 20 minutes, I'll give you some. Okay, no, now you got to work for 30 minutes. Now you only have to work for 15. So variable happens more in natural life than it does. So if you have a group of friends, they may say, hey, let's have a party this week. And they might not have another party for 2 weeks. And then they have a party 3 days later. You stay together because of that fixed, that variable reinforcer. You don't know when the fun will happen, but you know it will. So in your church, every Sunday, there is church. Well, are you still able to do church right now during COVID?
Yes.
Okay. See, my church, we have to sign up for a certain time, and then we go, and only part of the church can come for any given mass because it was too crowded, so they needed to spread us out. Church is a positive reinforcement. Every week, my church does this gathering, and we come together, and it feels good. So that's a fixed interval. You know when it's going to happen. But other things, you don't know when the good thing will happen, but it still makes you go, I'm going to stay a member of this group because I know something good's going to happen. You can also get what we call a fixed time, a fixed number, a ratio. So if every time, I used to work for fruit picking, because that's what you do in Prince Edward County when you're a teenager and you need money. So I would go and I would pick baskets of cherries, or I would pick baskets of apples, or I would pick strawberries. And for every bucket of apples I picked, I was paid 20 cents. For every bucket of cherries I was picked, I would get paid 20 cents. So that was a fixed ratio. It meant every time I accomplished a certain amount of something, I got the reinforcer. A variable one is sometimes you get paid after 10. Sometimes you only need to do 5. And that's why gambling is so addictive, because people keep going, because every so often you win. And every time you win, it feels so good, you want to keep trying it. So that's why gambling keeps doing it. That's why people will go to bars and try to pick women up, because every so often it works. So there are some of these really bad behaviors that when a good thing happens, it is so good, they'll keep trying to get it again and again. And variable reinforcement is the hardest one. So when you're trying to work with somebody who has a gambling addiction, that time they won felt so good, it's really hard to help them change it. So the next one is shaping, and that's when we realize we want our husband or wife to behave in a certain way. So the first time, maybe you want your husband to help you make supper every night. So the first night you go, oh, thank you so much for setting the table. And the next night you ask him, can you set the table and then come and help chop these potatoes? And you go, oh, that was so nice, and you hug him. So each time he gets a little bit closer to what you want him to do, you praise them or you give them a treat. And that video I showed the very first week where you saw the rats, what they did with the rats was the first time when the rats touched the ball, she gave them some peanut butter. Then she waited till they picked it up with their little paws. Then she gave them peanut butter. Then she put peanut butter on the rim of the basketball net so that they would go over there with the ball. And then she'd give them the peanut butter. So what she did was each time they got a little bit closer to doing the behavior, she gave them a treat. So that's how people train animals. If you're training an animal to plow, you don't just keep smacking it when it's going wrong. Every time it does it right, you give it a little handful of hay so that it knows the road to walk down. It knows the way to walk through the field. Observational learning is when I watch how other people do it so that I learn how to do it. Animals do that too. In fact, it's kind of my research. In order to get my PhD, I had to do 3 research projects. My first project was when I was my youngest, and I looked at how do budgies learn to open up food containers. And it turns out budgies learn to open up food containers by watching older budgies do it. So, yeah, dumb. But it's how we watch other people do it. It's how we figure out how to behave. Boys watch older boys to figure out how do they talk to girls. Girls watch their mothers to learn how to cook. You might not use it immediately, but you eventually learn it. One of the things we know is people with autism can't do it that way. So people with autism, if you don't specifically say, there is a lineup, you need to wait in the lineup. They'll see that there's something at the front they want, and they'll just walk to the front of the line. They don't see and learn by the way the other people are behaving. So that's one of the reasons when you have a child who is autistic, you have to explain everything. You can't just expect they'll get it by watching it. So autistic kids are different. Now, I went through that kind of fast, but I was really trying to talk about how you use it in real life therapy. And the best places, like I said, I use it when I'm working with a child who has bad behaviors that we're trying to reduce, or when we have a child who's having problems in school and we're trying to increase the behavior. So if I have a child who has temper tantrums in school, we'll try to ignore them, because as soon as you pay attention, sometimes that's all the kid wants, and he doesn't care if you're mad at him as long as he's the center of attention. But what we'll be doing is, for every 15 minutes you sit at your desk, you earn 1 point. And we never ever take their points away. Once you've earned your points, you've got them. Because think about it this way, if you had to be perfect at work every day, and every time you screwed up, they took away that day's pay, you'd never get paid, so you'd quit. So, but what we can do is say, every 15 minutes you're in your desk, you will earn 1 point. And at the end of the day, if you have 10 points, you can stop schoolwork 15 minutes early and go play with the basketball with your friend. So that's where we can use it very much with behavior. We can use it with couples because we're trying to teach them to be kind to each other. And it's really funny because you think it's natural, but when couples are in problems in their marriage, they want to focus on the problem. what you did wrong, what you did wrong. And that just makes them angrier at each other and not wanting to take care of each other. What we want to do first is you have to love somebody and want to be kind to them before you can talk about the problem. So I have had couples, and one of the problems was they have 3 children. No, 4 children. They have 4 children. And mother has always worked full time. But she was finding that as the children needed more supervision, when they came home from school, she needed to be there. She decided to take a job that she had fewer hours to work for. And the husband was very, very angry because she wasn't making as much money. But before we could even start to talk about that, because they were fighting all the time, we focused on what's something nice you can do for your wife every day when you get home from work? What is something nice you can do for your husband? And then he started to talk about her in a nice way. And then we could start to talk about, okay, she's earning less money. Can you still afford to live on that? She's earning less money, but you're not paying for a babysitter for 3 hours after school anymore. She's earning less money, but she's home to cook supper every night now. And you told me you really like her cooking supper. And in the end, he could say, yeah, it's not really changing how much money we make or not. I just felt it was unfair that I have to work full time and she doesn't. But by this time, because she wasn't working full time, she could do nice things for him and he stopped being angry about it. So it's about getting to them to the point where they can start to communicate. And I'm going to say this one's kind of about communication, but it's also about reinforcement. A lot of times people want to talk about a problem, that he doesn't trust me with money, or she doesn't think I'm a good enough provider. She doesn't think I help with the kids. We used to go out and have fun all the time and she doesn't want to go to parties anymore. And one of the things I often say is you can't talk to each other about problems if you can't talk to each other. So I'll assign them something like going for a walk and talking about what they see that looks interesting. So it might be flowers they see, it might be a house they see, but something. Or I'll tell them to talk about something that's in the news so that they can talk about it and have fun talking and not get mad. And it's once they can talk to each other and enjoy it, they both talked about a movie they liked, they talked about a sports game they liked, then we can talk about the problems because now they've learned how to talk to each other without immediately getting angry. So that's reinforcing communication.
May I just ask a question there?
Oh, go right ahead.
You are giving an example of in a relationship where people should not talk about the problems before you show them that you love them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what happens, what is your comment in a situation where they think they've hurt each other so much and they don't want to talk to each other? During that time, what do they do? How do they handle their problem?
One of the things is you often have to look at what is your actual problem. If one of them is cheating on the other person, yeah, you have to make an agreement that the cheating will stop while you figure out if you can save the marriage. If one of them is hitting them, you have to say you need to stop hitting because you can't stay married if you're hitting. But a lot of times what I hear is, well, it's no fun anymore. We never do anything together anymore. He doesn't pay attention to any of my worries. He thinks my worrying about the children is silly. Like, what are some of the problems people come to you with? Daniel, what are some of what are the problems they come to you with?
Yes, just like the examples you are giving, they are very similar.
Yeah.
They'll come like we no longer can walk together. We no longer can share even the Bible together. Such similar examples. And then how do they begin? Because each one is focusing on the mistakes of the other.
Yeah. So you say, what nice thing could you do for your husband? What is something you know he used to like when you did it? What is something nice you could do for your wife? And I'll give examples to them if they, so what if you brought your husband, as soon as he comes home from work, you have a cup of tea waiting for him? What if your wife, because she's been home working all day, that you put the plates on the table for her? When she brings you the tea, you need to say, thank you, that was nice. When he puts the dishes on the table, you have to say, thank you, I appreciate your helping me. When you get up in the morning, I'll tell them the first thing you do is say to them, I'm happy to see you. Thank you for taking care of me. When when your wife makes the bed, you say, thank you for making the bed. It's nice to come home to sleep in a clean bed. It's really, look for the really simple minor things. I notice you're drinking some water there. If your wife filled up the water glass, you say, thank you for the
Some
water.
coffee.
Oh, coffee. Thank you for
It's
making
coffee.
me coffee. You say to your wife, thank you, you made me coffee. So I get them to make a list of behaviors that they will thank their husband for if he did them, and a list they will thank their wife for. And then I say, come up with a list. And I'll say, if your husband is working, knock the dirt off his shoes when he comes home so that he'll have clean shoes for work. Make sure he is, if you've done the laundry, tell him, I did the laundry. You'll have clean underwear for work tomorrow. And then you tell the man to say, thank you, I appreciate you doing the laundry. So I start with those really, really basic things, because when you feel appreciated, then you want to go for a walk with them. So, and it's really, and I'll also give them the assignment to do things together. So if both of them like reading the Bible, one of you reads it out loud, and then the other person says why they like that verse. And then the first person who read it out loud says why he picked that verse. Then the other person reads a piece out loud, and they do the same thing. If they like to go for walks, they walk together and they hold hands and they tell about a memory of when they walked when they first got together. Remember when you used to come to my house and we'd hold hands and walk down the road? I was always so happy when I saw you coming to my house. So again, they're doing that praising of all the behavior and pointing out why it's positive. And it sometimes you get people and they don't want to do it. But it is, when we are married, we get into routines. People say a good marriage is hard work. And I say, no, it should never be hard work to be kind to someone you love. And this is reminding people behaviors are kindness. But I see so many people, and what they're doing is they come home from work and they go to they don't have time. They're like, they don't even read the Bible together anymore. They don't even walk together. Do those behaviors again. Because just doing it, even if they just do it, it starts to feel good again. So an assignment of behaviors. I often tell couples, try to cook supper together. Don't wait for your wife to put it on the table. Get up and you chop the vegetables with her. And then thank her for making a good meal. Thank him for helping you to chop.
Okay. Yeah.
That's when we're first a couple, we spend so much time doing that. And that's why we want to be together. And then we become a couple and we stop.
Okay.
And when we ignore the other person, what they learn is, I don't matter to you. So they stop.
Yeah.
And it's funny because sometimes one of them is more committed than the other and more willing to work and will keep doing the nice things. And the other person who thought they weren't going to be trying starts to go, oh, she brought me a coffee for breakfast again. Oh, my clothes were folded when I got home. Oh, she thanked me for bringing home supper, picking up the groceries. And they start to go, thank you back.
Mm.
And then you can start, sometimes then you have to start with the bigger, that you can move on to. Now we can talk about the things like, one of the ones that's often big is sexual intimacy because they've drifted apart. How do you come back together with that? Sometimes it's arguments about money. How do you come back together? Sometimes it's arguments about how should the children be raised.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's how do you forgive them if they cheated on you?
Mm.
Mhm.
Well, okay. Yeah.
Mhm. It's funny
Mm.
because it sounds very simple, but I
Mm.
think it is we stop doing it because once the person has fallen in love with us, we forget that we want them to fall in love with us for the rest of our lives. That if we stop doing those things that made them fall in love with us, they'll stop falling in love with us.
Mm.
I mean, I joke about it, but there have been tough times in my husband and my marriage. But every
Yeah.
time I remind myself, why did I fall in love with him? What do I have to do now to fall in love with him again?
Yeah. Um, Roseanne, kindly explain autism to me again. Um, in simple terms, what is it?
Autism is a disease which we see. We can diagnose it around age 2. Before that, you can't really tell. But it's their brains work differently, so they often have difficulty telling how other people feel. So they will do something like hit you and be surprised you cry. They often have difficulty handling sensory information, so that loud noises, they'll be like this. So in a classroom, they'll hide their heads. They often they don't follow social rules like sharing. And it's like, but I wanted it. Why should I have to give my brother part of it? I wanted it. Whereas a child without autism realizes there's only one piece and we both want some, so I'll share. That's the nice thing.
Mm.
Kids with autism, the way they think, they don't think that way. And a lot of the time when they talk to you, you're over there and they look like this. And they don't look at you when they talk. And a lot of the time, their voice is strange. They don't know how to keep their voice in a conversational tone. Some of them never learn to speak. So some of them are
Mm.
quite challenged. And Emmanuel has a question. Emmanuel,
Yes, I want to understand more where you said on the PowerPoint, there's a point where it is saying you see it in animal and see it also in people. How do we apply that one in observation or clinic?
I can't, your microphone's really fuzzy. Could you hear it better than me, Daniel? Because I may be wrong. I thought maybe
Yeah.
because you're both there. You can.
Yeah, his microphone is not very clear.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if it was because I was farther away. Can you type your question, Emmanuel? Like, do you have can you put it into chat and I can read it? Where did my arrows go? Can you put it into
Yeah.
chat?
I was saying, how can we then, I want you to explain more when you see it in animals and you see it in people.
Oh,
Because
you can see it. I heard you can see it in animals and people, and that was all I could hear.
yes,
What can you see in animals?
yes,
Well, because you can see learning in animals and in people, and you can see both of these because animals will also work to get food or stuff. So an animal can figure out there is always food here, and they'll go for it. You can teach animals to do tricks, but it has to be food or water or drugs. That's the only thing they'll work for, that they'll try to learn for. And in people, it's because we just react to that. Now, I don't know if I'm answering your question because I can't really hear you. Can you type a question in the chat? You can't type it?
Where does he touch to type it?
Okay, what are you use? Okay, on the bottom, there's a little sign that says chat. And if you click the chat, a message thing shows up and you can type a message, just type with the letters. At the, can you see the chat button?
Not really. Maybe Emmanuel is seeing it. I can't see it myself.
Okay, Manuel, if you send me the question in WhatsApp, I will send you a written explanation back. Does that make sense? Can you do that? Because I've seen you on WhatsApp. So if you put it on WhatsApp, I can send the answer there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I continue too?
Yep. So autism is it's what we call a developmental disorder. They think differently, they use language differently. And there are some famous people. Bill Gates probably has some autism because he has a really hard time reading people's emotions, and he's admitted it. He said he's got Asperger's. But there are people, and it's like their emotional radar is broken.
Oh.
And a lot of them, if I can't see it, feel it, hear it, or touch it, I don't believe in it. So a lot of times people with autism have a great deal of difficulty believing in God. Because the part
Do
of their
they have a problem with it? Do they also have a problem to remember things?
Maybe, maybe not. They're like normal people when it comes to memory. Some of them have excellent, what we call sort of repetitive memory. So they'll repeat exactly what you said, but they may not understand it. So they do this thing called echolalia, and they can echo. They will repeat entire conversations that they heard, but they don't understand it. So, yeah, and it's more common in boys, but it's a brain disease that you're born with.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say usually it begins to develop from what age?
It's present from birth, but they look normal till they're about 2. It's when your language starts developing that you realize, okay, how do we apply in animals and when doing counseling or to our daily life? The point you see it in animals and people. I think one of the ways Emmanuel has printed his question. I'm not quite sure I'm fully understanding it. In our daily life, one of the things we do, for me, if I have a bunch of chores to do, and I'd really rather not, at the end of my chores, I will say, if I get the kitchen cleaned up, I will give myself 10 minutes of time to do quilting, which is sewing. So in my daily life, one of the ways I use reinforcement is to do the hard things first. So do my laundry. And when I'm done my laundry, sit down and have a cup of tea. Do my house cleaning. And when I'm done, I get to use my sewing a little bit. Because sewing for me is fun, it's not a chore. Write my reports, because writing reports is hard. Then I can sit down and watch a show with my husband. So that's one way. With my kids, I did a lot of get this done, you'll be allowed to do that. In counseling, when people follow through on the homework and they come to me and they say, we went for a walk, we held hands and we talked about our first date, I'll go, good for you. That is wonderful. I'm so proud of you for having tried that. I can see you're really working hard on your marriage. When I'm talking, if you're talking about the observational learning, there's a lot of things I'm not very good at. I am very good I'm not very good at things with tools or doing building and stuff. Right now, my husband is helping my son build a deck. So I will sit back and I will watch him put the wood in. And once I've watched him do 2 or 3 pieces, then I will try it. So observational learning happens when I'm too nervous to try something before I've watched somebody else do it a few times. Or if I'm wanting to learn how to do something, all those YouTube videos are observational learning. Those people who show you how to make certain foods and how to do different crafts, or that's observational learning. We often do it when it's like, if I want to know how to cook something, I will watch somebody cook it. I learned how to cook shima by watching the women at the training center stirring it, and I realized you can't do it like I do rice, which is you just boil it. You have to stir and stir and stir and stir and stir. Okay, I've lost him. Okay, I hope I answered his question. Do you have more questions?
Yeah. Yes. You have used in the PowerPoint and explained a lot on the reinforcers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in a layman's language, what are they?
A reinforcer is anything that people want to get it and earn and work for it. So a reinforcer just means anything that if I get it, I will do that again. So for all of us, money is a reinforcer. I will go and do my job if you give me money. Anything that makes me feel good and somebody else has control of it is a reinforcer. So sewing makes me feel good, it's a reinforcer. Hugging the baby makes it feel good, that's a reinforcer. A punishment is anything that makes you go, oh, I don't want that to happen again. I'm not doing that again.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And salvet?
Pardon? I couldn't hear.
Is it salvet?
I'm not hearing.
Is S-A-L, salvet? Salva?
Okay, I am not hearing, I'm hearing salvage.
Yes. Ending with the T-E.
Salivate. Sorry, salivate's when you spit.
Yes.
When you salivate, it's just spit. What Pavlov was studying digestion. He wanted to understand how food dissolved in your body. And what he was doing is he was wearing this white coat, and he would come in to give the animals meat. And he was measuring how much spit they made in order to figure out, was spit important in digesting food? But what he discovered is they got so used to him, as soon as they saw him, they started drooling spit. And he realized they drool spit even when they don't need to eat. So salivate just means to spit. So it's like when you come home and
Okay.
your wife is making us a really good smelling food, you start getting spit in your mouth. What he discovered is he could make the dogs spit to his coat. He could make them spit to the sound of a bell. So he got dogs, and that's how he started to say, wait a second, you can make people react even when it's not normal to react to that. So you shouldn't salivate because you hear a bell. You shouldn't start to have spit in your mouth like you're about to get fed a good food. But he found out he could train them. And like I said, Watson found out he could make a kid be terrified of a little cute bunny rabbit by constantly, every time the kid went near the rabbit, he banged these two metal things together and the kid would be scared and start to cry. And he did that about 10 or 15 times. And then he brought the rabbit out and didn't make the noise. And poor little kid was like, ah, no, and didn't want the rabbit near him, even though it was like this cute little fuzzy ball. He made the kid scared of the rabbit because the kid thought every time the rabbit comes out, there's that horrible noise. And now I'm afraid of that rabbit because that horrible noise is going to come. So that's kind of the ease. That's Pavlov discovered he could make them get all spitty. So he's the first guy who found out we could do that. I know it's dumb.
Yeah.
But it's also how we start to understand how we learn. So like in the first year of life, babies learn to walk and they learn to crawl. Now, some of that comes naturally, but learning to go to the bathroom in a toilet doesn't come naturally. But we can teach that by constantly putting them on. Learning to eat with a knife and fork rather than just shoving it into your mouth, or learning to eat politely when you're doing this and not just go, they have to learn that by being taught, by watching people. So what Pavlov started to look at was all these very, very complicated things. And we think it's all got to be taught by language. But cats teach kittens how to use a litter box. Birds teach their babies how to fly. So there's all these very complicated things that are taught simply because you make the connections, even though there's no words.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's there. This is a really funny one. What they did this to a teacher, a professor. And what they did was the professor was teaching at the front of the classroom, and he would walk back and forth in front of the classroom while he was talking. So he kind of talked to everybody. And what everybody in the class agreed to do as an experiment, when the teacher was on this side of the room over here, they would all smile and nod and go, yeah. And then when he walked to the other side of the room, they'd all go, and they'd make a kind of face like, this is dumb, we don't get this, this isn't very good. So the teachers start to stay on this side of the room. And then they divided that section of the room into half so that when he was closer to the wall, they'd go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they'd look really happy. So the professor started to teach closer to the wall. And within about 3 weeks, they had him in the back corner, standing and teaching from the corner, because as soon as he left the corner, they'd start to go. And nobody said anything. Like, it's never that he went, oh, it was all, he just kind of made the connection without even realizing it. So, but I always thought that one was really funny, because get them cornered. And it's the same thing with little kids and bringing stuff to mommy.
Oh, yes.
Little kids will bring you dead bugs, and mom will go, right? Because it's but then they'll bring you a flower, and mommy goes, oh, pretty. Well, after a while, the kid doesn't bring you dead bugs anymore. I'm sorry, my son used to bring me dead bugs.
Roseanne, did you say that when a child is sexy, is that natural, or one has to learn to teach the child to do the sucking?
To do
the baby?
Okay, when you're
I mean, the baby.
when
When
you
the baby starts, is that natural, or you have to teach the baby how to do the sucking?
to do oh no, that's natural. If you do this to a baby's face, it'll immediately do that. That's natural. We actually have a bunch of natural reflexes. This one is natural because that if we had to teach the baby to suck, a lot of babies would die.
Mhm.
So that's instinctive. Another one that's instinctive is if you're holding your baby and you drop like this, the baby reaches up to grab like that. That happens automatically. When you put something, if a baby puts their hand on something hot, that's automatic. So there's a whole, those early ones that if you didn't do it, they would die. So a baby will naturally cry if it's hurting. We don't have to teach it to cry if it's hurting. We do have to teach it to yell for help when other things are happening, like the sink is spilling or.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But you can use that suck reflex for people who are physically disabled so that they can use it to tap that side or tap that side, and then they can suck and they can make computer stuff work. That's a very sophisticated technology. But Stephen Hawking's the very famous scientist who was in a wheelchair, used that to communicate.
Mhm.
Mhm. Now, and are people able to get at the book online yet?
Able to get where?
The book. Are you able to read the chapters in the book?
Maybe others. I
Haven't
don't
you
know.
downloaded it?
We
I
haven't
wasn't.
say we have maybe it's network here or it's the phones. I don't know. We are
Okay.
we have problem to download some things which you send.
Yeah. So I think what
but
we're gonna.
others are able.
I'm wondering if what we're gonna need to do is print a couple of copies of the book, and the next time we get to Zambia is give the copies of the book so that they're at the church.
I think that would be very great. That would be a very great help indeed.
Okay.
Because
So
not
I'll talk to
everyone
Leonte.
might. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
easy would it be to ship it? I'll talk to Leonte and see if we can get a copy delivered there.
Okay.
Okay.
Or maybe I don't know the other easy way of us because we can also download it here. Others can, if there can be one or two who are able to download, then we can download it here and
then share
bind
it.
it together into a book. Yes,
Yeah.
and share it or something.
Yeah, because that would make it easier.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but I don't know. Maybe we can use other email or maybe
Oh.
try the email. Yes, maybe. If it can
Ooh.
be sent through email, I'm sure
Oh.
2 or 3 of us would have good phones big enough to receive
Yeah.
that for easy downloading. Yes.
See, I can't read anything on a phone. I'm half the time I can't read messages on the phone because my eyes are old. My vision after my cancer, my vision has been much worse. Okay. I think it's almost 10:30 there.
Okay.
I'm going to talk to Bonnie and we'll sort out what next week's lecture is going to be about. And we will try and post the videos, and I will try to get, I'm trying to get them up earlier. Right now I'm looking at the clock and I have to take supper over to my stepfather. He's not able to cook right now. So life is a little bit difficult. But if you've got other questions, if you have questions about anything you read or see or stuff you're not sure about, you can either post them in the classroom or you can put them on WhatsApp and Bonnie and I can talk about them and send you answers.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to hang up. It's been a long work day and I need to eat. But I will put more stuff up online and we will keep this going, okay? I hope you're enjoying it and I hope you're learning a lot.
Very much. It's very nice. We always trouble you with the big words. You know, the subject is very interesting,
Yeah,
but there are certain words that we really want to. So always go backwards to explain certain words that we
yeah,
think
I
are
will
big
try
for
to
us.
be more careful with words. And as I think about it, I could have written spit, but I couldn't think of another. It's one of those things when you read the book, the word, and you're going, okay, what other word could I use? And until you said it, I didn't think of the word spit. It's like,
Yes,
oh yeah, spit's easier. But I
yeah,
will,
but it's okay because we can always ask you to explain.
yeah, and I will be much louder on the
And
next one.
that's better for us. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll be
Thank you.
much louder. Okay, take care and have a good week, and we'll see you again next Monday.
Thank you, and regards to Ross.
Yep, I just heard him talking to our daughter.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Have a good day.
you
Thank
too.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
And I need to